The August 16th special meeting of the Clark County Board of Education. You would please rise and join me in a moment of silence. And I guess during this moment of silence, think about our good friend Leslie Rosenthal. Of course, we lost him last week. Then if you join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We got nobody started at 6:31. Ms. Ellis, is there anybody signed in for public comments? All righty. So the first item on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda.
Move we adopt the agenda as written.
Motion by Mr. Peridot,
Second.
second by Ms. Hicks. Is there any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 4-0. There were no public comments, and so we'll move right into student support services. Item number 2 is discuss and propose 2018-2019 tax rates for real property, personal property, motor vehicles, and utilities.
Do we know if Dr. Kudak's coming?
The last communication I had with Dr. Kudak is he felt he would not be able to make this meeting due to work conflicts.
I move that we excuse Dr. Kudak from the meeting.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to excuse Dr. Kudak made by Mrs. Hicks and seconded by Mr. Peridot. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So that motion passes 4-0. Sorry about that.
That is okay.
Housekeeping there.
That is fine. You were given several documents in this packet of information for tonight. Some were new documentations. At the last meeting, Ms. Hicks asked for do we have a picture of how we ended our year? And so I had put together a report that was going to be presented at the August 21st meeting, but I went ahead and included that in your items tonight. I'm sorry, Michael. If you'll skip to the newspaper, go back to the list of items, I'll tell you which one to click on. Shoot, I can't see that far away. Do the newspaper report by fund, I think it's K.
I got it.
The item K, that's the board submittal. So this report, it's the one that's by fund that looks like this, if you have it printed out. Can you see? We've got governmental funds, proprietary, and kind of small, but this is listed out by fund. So this gives a picture with our unaudited AFR that was submitted to KDE. Prior to our audit, any adjustments that may occur, how we ended the fiscal year at this point. Again, this is the unaudited version. So that kind of gives you a picture of Fund 1 is general fund. When we always talk general fund dollars, that's Fund 1. So that gives you a picture of how we started the year, the monies we brought in for the year, then what we expended for the year, and without beginning balance, we ended a negative 4.4 million, but with our beginning balance, we had 10.3 million we carried over. So that's kind of the picture of Fund 1, where our property tax dollars go. Again, if you can remember, we've transferred quite a bit of money to our construction fund for the projects we were working on. But that's a picture of where we are right now with our 2018 ending.
Thank you.
So the other document I just wanted to run through briefly with you is the tax rate presentation. It's the one that's like a PowerPoint. And that is a summary of where we stood in May with the tentative budget, what our revenue sources at that point were, and what we had budgeted. If you'll flip to the next slide. So that's the summary. You have a slide that summarizes your general fund. Again, only general funds where our property tax dollars, majority are deposited. A picture of the summary of the expenditures. And as you remember, when we stood here May 22nd talking about this budget prior to it being approved, we had an excess of $138,000 that had not been budgeted at that point based on what we were budgeting for reoccurring revenues. Once that budget was approved with the 2% and 4% salary increases for our certified and classified staff respectively, that increased our salaries by $827,000. So once you add that to that excess of money, we were then deficient, or we had budgeted more than our reoccurring revenue dollars at that point by $641. So that's just kind of a summary of that, and Mr. Heisel asked me to pinpoint that amount, and so that amount is specifically the $688,641. And that's the amount of money that we're trying to at least break even on for this next year, 2019 budget, with the tax rate increase of new dollars coming into the budget, reoccurring dollars, to make us balance out and not spend salaries out of contingency. So again, the options that would cover that are a 3% tax rate increase, which again, that is 3% revenue increase, not 3% tax rate going up 3%. The 3%, 4% are really the only two options that would cover that deficiency that we have in our budget right now. The other options from KDE, I've listed them on the next slide, are your compensating and your subsection 1 rates. That's just a summary of those two rates. And then the last slide's just kind of a picture of if your property value is this, and we went with the 4% rate, that would be an annual increase of 15 for anyone's property valued at 100,000, 2 or 3, the 30 and 45. Are there any questions?
Okay, so no questions of Mrs. Ellison?
Yes.
All
I
right.
was just waiting for the chair to
Oh,
do his thing.
I was just trying to make some notes here.
Okay, the rates that are mentioned,
Yes, ma'am.
those are not the only rates that we can take, is that correct?
No, ma'am.
Okay, just,
Those are just the suggested rates, the two that would cover our current deficiency of our reoccurring budgeted dollars. But the board is free to choose whatever
You
rate.
should have documentation showing those over.
There is another documentation you were provided at last Tuesday's meeting, and it's been revamped a little bit for tonight's meeting. It's called the 2018 property tax rates. It's the Excel looking spreadsheet. That one right there, Michael. So last Tuesday, you were provided with a version of this spreadsheet that only had the 100% collection rate, which is the values given to us by KDE, that they base theirs on 100%. OVEC keeps a rolling average of our 5-year history collection rate, and they have come up with the collection rate with that rolling average is 97.23%. So that column has been added for you of what that tax rate and at that collection rate would be. So that is all the different versions. Our current 62.2, if you did a 1, 2, 3, 4%, the compensating subsection, those are all the different rates available, and anything in between.
You know, it gets confusing. Those who have not seen it for a while, they banter around the term 4% increase. Of course, you know this, but for those who are not aware of it, certainly everyone on this board is, but the members of the audience or the public may not be. The 4% is a revenue increase.
Yes, sir.
The particular rate that equates to a 4% increase is not a 4% increase in your tax rate.
Correct.
What is the numeric increase if the 4% revenue rate is taken with exonerations? Have you done-
1.5 cents.
Have you done the math on exactly what the percentage increase that would be
Oh.
from the 62.2 cents to that number?
Just one second.
I've got it buried in here somewhere, but I just thought it'd be useful in terms of clarification. Because if that's rate is chosen, a lot of people might think, oh my goodness, the tax rate's going up 4%. That's not an accurate description at all.
Right, it's a 2.4% increase in the rate. It's 1.5 cent.
Okay, so
Increase.
does that include the rate, is that the
That's what the
63.7? Okay, so
exonerations.
if the board happened to choose that particular rate, 63.7, that's a 2.4% increase in the tax rate.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just wanna
Versus, yes.
I just want to clarify
Stated
that.
as a 4. Yes, you are correct.
Further questions, discussions, thoughts?
Considering the annual financial report that has lots of information that's kind of difficult to follow, but it seems that we're still ending up with a significant amount to put back into the budget, is that correct?
You roll over a little over $10 million.
And how much did we project that we were going to have?
We projected 10 million even, and we rolled over 10,398,32.
Ms. Hicks, I had a few concerns, but I don't want to step on your toes, so I'll let you
That's
complete all
okay.
yours so we're not bouncing around against each other.
When the estimate is projected for how much revenue we will gain from the property tax.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, we projected, well, for the PSC part, we projected 1.5 million and change. The actual was 1.9 million and change. Are we doing anything different this year on how we are projecting the amount that we expect to get from property taxes?
No, you have the option to budget a 100% collection rate or any collection rate in between there. The projection is based on the property value times the rate you choose. That's the projection. And we projected last year on our rolling average collection rate, and we collected more than our average last year. That's unpredictable.
Okay, so, but we are budgeting for the 100%?
No, that was budgeted on the 90s, whatever the rolling average.
97.23 or whatever.
Whatever that rolling average last year was. I'd have to pull last year's documents to see what the exact rolling 5-year average was, but it was essentially around 97% collection rate. And we collected more than that.
Which is sometimes a recurring thing. And how do we, and on our interest on investments, we projected 150,000. The year-to-date actual was 388,000.
Yes, last year, when we set our budget at the draft level, we never increased it from the 150. That was based on an average interest collection rate at that point. And we have since increased our bank rate percentage of what we're being paid on our fund and interest quite a bit from that projection last year. And so for our budget this next year, we've projected a $300,000 earnings on investment. So we've compensated for that, for this in the 19 budget.
And our miscellaneous revenue, we projected 150,000, and we have 920, and we realized 928,000.
706,000 of that is a one-time entry that crosses months that I cannot do nothing about because it crosses bank statement months, and I have to put it somewhere on the statement and that's our insured cash sweep where money goes in and out of our bank account. So that is not real money. Because it essentially is now a negative in our July statement. Because it came
So
back
it's not
out.
real money. So which amounts in here are real money? If this is not real money, how do we figure out the real money from the?
As I explained in a prior meeting, there are set object codes, org codes from the state and how I record revenue. A miscellaneous revenue category is where everything else gets thrown when there's not a specific category to put it in. Insured cash sweep money that crosses bank statement months, there's not a code for that. I have no choice but to put it in miscellaneous revenue. And I can't help that it crosses months and it shows in 1 month and then the next month you're gonna see a very large negative. I can't, I mean, there's nothing I can do about that. I have to balance the bank to the cash.
Okay.
And so I have to put it somewhere and it goes into miscellaneous revenue.
Okay, so this annual financial report, this end of the year thing, is the bottom line an accurate number?
As I told you, no number is accurate and final until the audit is finished in November. I can
Okay.
only give you the
Okay,
numbers
thank you.
to date right
That's
now
fine. Thank you,
that are unaudited.
thank you,
I can't change the facts.
thank you.
Since at our last meeting, we had, as happens, some different perspectives that were brought to the table, and since we just had 3 members there, we had difficulty being able to realistically achieve something that looked like it had a hope of getting 3 votes for it. So that was the reason we had to defer and take another bite of the apple at this meeting. I've given it a lot of thought since that meeting as to trying to weigh the different competing interests. I think there's, in looking at the AFR report, there's a lot of items that would make one think that perhaps that we could lean towards the lower end of the range. And I think certainly it's a very valid concern to say maybe we should go for the top end of the range. And I think it would be very useful because there are practical concerns out there from both ends well, let me back up. So the reason we would have to have a tax hearing is if we chose something besides the compensating rate.
Yes, sir.
And the compensating rate would actually have our rate go backwards. We're at 62.2 cents now. And if we chose the compensating rate, that would move us back to, with exonerations, 61.3 cents. So if we couldn't come to any agreement, we would default to 61.3 cents. And if we said, well, perhaps a reasonable path on the low end would be 62.2 cents. In other words, just have the same tax rate again. If we wanted to have the same tax rate again, we have to have a public hearing.
Yes, sir.
And I'll just put my cards on the table. I think balancing all the concerns that we have, we've got needs in the district. At the same time, we have to balance against needs of our taxpayers. I think at a minimum, I think 62.2 cents in my mind is probably what our minimum rate should be. And I think practically the maximum rate that we might want to consider is not something I'd say that I would personally support, but I think it would be reasonable for other members to support, is on the top end of the range, which is the 63.7 cent rate. So I feel that it probably makes sense to cross that threshold at least up to the 62.2 cents and to have a meeting. Again, we're just sharing our various opinions. And so what really makes sense to me is if we could craft a motion and essentially say that we would like to propose a minimum rate of 62.2 cents and a maximum rate of 63.7 cents. And then by by proposing such a motion, then that would move us on to having a hearing. I've discussed that concept of a minimum and maximum with our attorney and also representative with KDE. And I think conceptually it might work, but it's just, for the lack of a better term, very clunky to be able to convert that into an advertisement that we feel is time-tested and wouldn't be subject to any complaints by the public. So where I'm going to be moseying around to here in a little while after discussions, I'll be putting forward a motion to propose a minimum rate of 62.2 and a maximum rate of 63.7. But in the ad, since there's not a good way to accomplish that, is to simply use the term that we would have a potential rate of 63.7, and then the other verbiage could be what the standard is. So I'm just going to lay my cards on the table. That's a promotion. That's a motion I'll be proposing, and would support, and would certainly, when the appropriate time, I can give you all the specific details on it. But that's I'll put my cards on the table. That's where I'm coming from, and I think that would accommodate the concerns from several different areas to give us that range, and to use the word potential.
Well, I guess my only thoughts there, of course, this meeting is only to propose, to figure out whether we need another meeting or not. I guess I'm just not understanding your wording of the 62.2, because if we just propose the 4% revenue increase with the 63.7, then that leaves our options on the table. What is I don't understand why we even need to put the 62 in. I mean, if that's what you're for, that's fine. I'm just saying, like I said the last meeting, I think since it's just a proposal, just shoot for the top end and then we hash everything out when we get in the meeting. So
I think this would, where the 62.2 would show up would be in the minutes in terms of what the specific minimum would be. And, I could say, the minimum would be 62.0, and that certainly would be agreeable. But I wanted to state that my position is 62.2 would be the minimum rate that we would have available, and 63.7 would be the maximum. And then to convert this to an ad, we would use the word potential 63.7 rate, because you really can't use a minimum maximum in the ad. But I think what I'm hoping is that verbiage would accommodate members that are interested in the lower end of the range by stating that as the potential one point, and certainly another member might think that 62.2 is not too low. It would also accommodate your concerns to make sure we've got that top end rate available to us also.
But the ad would only mention the 63.7 rate, correct?
Right, and it would use the modifier, instead of the word proposed rate, it would use the potential rate. And we actually used that same wording, verbiage last year in our August the 2nd ad used the word potential rate.
Is that the one we had to come back and redo?
We did a second one on the 18th that used the word proposal, but I've run the potential wording versus proposal past Mr. Elkins, and in his opinion, that would be fine and dandy. I'm not sure that's a legal term, but fine and dandy is how I interpret it.
Well, I think it serves the purpose of putting the public on notice what the highest proposed rate is, or could be, and they can be here to object, and that's the purpose of the advertisement.
And I've actually taken the liberty to try to craft, based upon that, an advertisement. Would this be appropriate at this point in time to share with my fellow board members? Is that okay with you guys? I've got one here, and you can pass that down to whoever else might want that. So in what we get from KDE, they describe standard wording. So I've started with their standard wording, tweaked it just a little bit. I've asked Mrs. Ellis at the bottom, because we have, as a district, we have to determine the general areas of where the revenue would be spent. And I'll highlight that in a second, give you all a chance to read that first. And this is, of course, this is a proposal. We could tweak whatever we want to on this wording to get something that everybody could be happy with.
Does this meet our needs legally? I mean, are we think this statement,
Yeah, I've also sent this to Mr. Elkins to give him a chance to review this.
but the one that we have from the Department of Education has been approved by them, correct? I mean, that's, is there a procedure to where you send it, that you have to have it cleared from the Department of Education? I just, just this is one that they always send and say fill in the blanks.
The wording that's in here versus like the wording Fayette County has and wording Madison County has, it's not word for word exactly the same.
Basically, as long as we let them know that what our highest rate is, the public knows our highest rate, then we fulfilled our obligations to the
Well,
public.
the notice has to contain 8 elements, and I think all 8 elements are there. So, there's no provision that would prevent us from including more information, but those 8 pieces have to be there, and I think they're included in that
Okay.
notice.
All right.
Is there any kind of problem with having the board minutes reflect one motion, having the ad in the paper reflect something else?
Well,
Not the same.
the statute doesn't require us to publish our order or move it second. It requires us to advertise the possibility of the levy of a tax rate greater than the compensated rate, and include those 8 specific pieces of information.
And I've drafted as sort of a draft motion, this seemed like it's got some traction here, and hopefully I've tied together these concepts. Minutes to minute, to mention the minimum and the maximum, but then mention that, for the sake of advertisement, we use the word potential. And of course, I'm always open for improvement.
Okay, so if we can tweak the wording, why can't we include the minimum rate, the potential minimum rate, in addition to the potential maximum rate?
It's gonna make a lot.
Wouldn't that just be additional information within the ad?
That's correct. KDE, after it receives the property assessments from the PBA, is required by law to provide certain pieces of information to us. And one of the pieces of information it gives us is, there's 3 pieces of information. One of them is, I think, what the compensating rate is, and then a proposed tax rate for the district. And the one that we got this year, I think, was 63.5%. So then they do the calculations for us to put in that advertisement so that we don't get the math wrong, is my understanding of the way that works. So they didn't give us one, for instance, for 63 cents on the 100. We don't know what those calculations are, at least not from KDE. And if we're going to come up with them, then somebody has to be qualified to make that calculation. That's not me. So I said to Mr. Heisel, unless we're prepared to make those calculations and be certain that they're correct, I think the better practice would be to put the public on notice about the highest potential rate, and then if we wind up actually levying by a majority vote a lower rate, then we can determine what those calculations would be.
So can our finance officer determine what those rates would be if for a 62.2 or some amount therein?
She probably can. I don't want to speak for her,
Those amounts are on that page right there.
Okay, so why can't we use those?
but I think I'm not going to say that you can't use them. I just don't think it's one of the pieces of information that's required by the statutes. It's not one of the 8 pieces of information that's required. So it's additional, as I said earlier. I don't think that tells it excludes our ability to add more information, but the minimum information is included here.
The purpose, I'm assuming, Mr. Elkins, is just to let the public know that their tax rates are going to be going up if we put a notice like this out. And they have the opportunity to come in and express their opinion.
Exactly. So just to further the discussion, if we suggest some rate other than the one that also includes some corresponding calculation, and we don't include that calculation, then we're leaving it to the public to try to determine what that is, Or they may come later and say, well, if I'd known that was gonna generate $17,50,000, I'd have come. And so I think that's the reason that the actual dollar amounts are included in the amount that we advertise. Because they're probably not qualified to do the math either, and we don't want to hear later that they didn't understand what we really meant.
Okay, but if it's a 62.2 rate, their tax would not be going up
Their
from
tax,
what it would have been last year.
their tax would not go up, but the number would go up because of the growth of new assets in the community, both in terms of real estate, motor vehicles, and personal property. So the numbers that we used last year would be greater this year. The rate would be the same, but the revenue produced by that would be higher.
And again, from my perspective, it seems like a minor difference, but by replacing the word proposed rate with potential rate, I'm happy to move forward on that. Because I can't support at this point in time a proposed, saying that I would agree to a proposed rate of 63.7, but I'm happy to say to let our taxpayers know there's a potential rate of 63.7. Sounds like it's a minor.
What?
It sounds like it's a minor difference, but to my mind, it's not. I'm happy to say we're gonna advertise that there's a potential rate that high so people know, but I'm personally not saying that I'm supporting a 63.7 cent proposal. So I think if we just swap out that one word, it makes it very amenable to me. Did I use amenable correct?
Yes,
Phew,
but
I thought I was gonna get in trouble
oh,
there.
I'm just kind of confused. My thing is, when I see an ad, I think that it expresses the intent. If I don't intend to vote for a rate other than the 62.2 or a 61.3 or whatever, then why would I vote for a potential rate of 63.5 or 7 or whatever if I know that I'm not going to vote for that when the tax rate is actually adopted?
I think because this body has the possibility of doing that. I don't think you're going out on a limb for yourself. I wouldn't look at it that way. I would just look at it as this body has the potential to make the tax at 63.7. Individually, you may not be for it. I mean, that's like any other decision that we make. You may go 3-2, and it goes to the board past that, even though 2 people may have voted against, the board still passes it.
Yeah, I view the ad that says, Clark County Board of Education wants to hear public comments regarding a potential rate. And so if people look at that and go, well, that interests me, I think I'll scamper right down there to that meeting and throw in my 2 cents. But again, it doesn't say proposed rate, we're just telling them there's a potential rate out there. It's like, we're serving notice that it might go up that high.
I mean, this is not new. I mean, this has been done every year we've had school systems. So, I mean, you know, everybody knows that their tax bill's gonna come in end of October, November, whatever, and we do this every year. And I mean, they know it's coming. I mean, we have pretty much the same people that show up, the 2 or 3 that show up. Now, we may get more, I don't know, but I mean, I don't see, and of course, you know, I'm speaking from a guy that likes a higher rate, but I don't look at that being locked in there. If the board votes for something else, then that's what we voted on. I mean, if we start with that, then at least the public's on notice of knowing that there's a possibility that this may happen.
Mr. Elkins, there's no different, I mean, there's nothing legally, no legal problem with the word, changing the word to potential from proposed to potential.
I don't think so. I think it gets you to the point of advertisement and setting a meeting, you know, where you might not be able to get past the idea that there may not be a sufficient willingness to actually propose a fixed rate tonight. We're against the background where this has to be completed by September 15th, and it's gonna take 14 days of advertising before we meet. And so, you know, the window gets shorter all the time.
I'd be happy to take a stab at the motion right now and see if there's 3 votes support of it. I certainly don't want to cut off you, Ms. Sticks. Do you have any other further concerns to share?
No.
Okay.
Are you going to ask Ms. Ritchie if she has anything to add?
Golly gee willikers.
Well, everyone else has expressed an opinion.
I'm just listening between.
Ms. Ritchie, I didn't mean to be rude. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
You're fine, I'm not offended at all. Honestly, if I look at this, and I am a taxpayer, if I see potentially, or what was the other one?
Proposed.
All I'm gonna see is they're talking about raising my taxes, so I'm gonna come to the meeting if I want to be here. So, that's my theory on it.
Okay.
A potential proposal, whatever, I just see, hey, they're talking about raising my taxes.
Okay, well, let me take a stab at this. I would like to move for approval of the following tax levy per $100 of assessed value for the 2018-2019 period. A minimum real estate rate of 62.2 cents and a maximum real estate rate of 63.7 cents. A minimum personal property rate of 62.2 cents and a maximum personal property rate of 63.7 cents and a motor vehicle rate of 53.5 cents. And because the KRS approved...
Utility?
I don't think we said utilities within this format.
When do we? Sorry.
Let-
Okay.
Excuse me. We'll put a pin in that and set that off to the side. And because the KRS approved formats are typically not designed to describe a minimum, and maximum rate, my motion is to describe the rates in the ad as a potential general fund tax levy of 63.7 cents on both real estate and personal property, inclusive of exonerations, as more specifically described in the draft ad that I just passed out. Period. That is my motion.
The attorney has approved that wording, correct? No doubt.
Did you have any problem with my
The
wording of my
wording.
motion?
Yeah, the
Yes.
wording in you do have a problem?
No, I don't have any problem. I thought you asked me if I had a
Well, I
chance to
did,
review
but then
and
he
approve.
said, so, okay.
Now, the motion and the ad are gonna be a little bit different, is that
Yeah.
correct? That's the way we're looking at this.
Well, I refer to the ad in my motion.
Right, yes, you did, okay. Well, I'll second it for more discussion as well.
Okay. Now that I have that motion on the floor, is there further discussion about the motion and any particular tweaking that might be needed for friendly amendments, et cetera?
Just to make certain in the ad, of course, the example you gave us has got the 63.5 cents on real property and 63.5 on personal property. So those are not including the exoneration, so are we putting,
I pulled that verbiage exactly from what was proposed to us by KDE, and then added in the parenthetical note, which is the board may add an additional 0.2 cents. And
so it's understood that it could be 63.7?
It says.
Go ahead, it's right here. And I
Yeah,
lifted that
rates would be
wording.
63.7 cents and 63.7 cents respectively. If you add the .2 exonerations,
Okay. So this is in the ad, okay, I'm good.
it gives you the 63.7.
Okay.
And I should also point out, at the bottom, the general areas to which revenue of $584,578 above the 2018 revenue is to be allocated are as follows. The cost of collections, and then, here, Ms. Ellis. Ms. Ellis has calculated the cost of collections would be $13,153. The building fund would be $55,413. And then basically the rest of it, we can allocate as to however we feel is appropriate. The way I've drafted the ad is I've allocated $100,000 to safety and allocated the remaining $416,012 to instruction. Now,
Thoughts on that, Mr. Christie? Are we limiting ourselves or anything
Well,
with this, or what, I mean, I
That
don't.
does, yeah, that does, in my opinion, that you've committed how you're going to do some of it. If you just do it all to, I mean, the collections is going to be what it's going to be. I mean, I'm fine with that. The building fund, that's the amount you're required to set aside.
Right,
So
yeah,
that's
those
what
are in
those are
this
givens.
document.
The only other thing is the 100,000, maybe it sends a message to the community, you're putting some money aside for certain things other than salary, but if you just put it all into instruction, you're not limited to anything. That you can put.
But it just, I mean, that's, you know, safety is such a big issue, and, you know, we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars this year on safety. We don't know what else we're
And
gonna
the
do.
brick is still being used to prop open doors.
What else is coming down, is coming down the
I brought it
line?
in
Next
from
year?
outside.
Oh, here, oh, we just never picked it up.
well,
Cosmetic.
and I thought the 100 was I think we're both on the same page with that, was a conservative number. I mean, just the SROs themselves is gonna be more than 100,000. So I wanted to send a message and make sure the
Yeah,
taxpayers knew we were spending at least 100,000 for that. That's
It
certainly
doesn't, it doesn't limit us, or doesn't, I mean, if we don't buy anything, I mean, what if we don't spend 100,000 in safety? But I guess we're going to, because we got officers, I guess, we're, okay. If we think we can live with that, I'm good with it.
Do we have specifics related to safety that we're thinking about?
I think the SROs. Well, I think it's the SROs.
SRO, we got equipment.
That does,
We've got some equipment, we have to equip 3 more officers.
Constant camera updates
Yes.
all the time.
We
You're
have
always
some
gonna be
security
in
camera
that.
updates.
You got the gates at the house, good, you put those in all those, I mean,
But the SROs themselves, that's way over 100.
Yeah.
Yes, it's 3.
Have-
It is.
have meetings been held with teachers and staffs about keeping their classroom doors closed?
Yes. They're not required to keep classroom doors closed.
Isn't
only
that a
requirement-
basic safety thing?
No, the keeping the perimeter safe is the basic safety. Keeping the doors to the exterior closed and locked at all times. Their doors, if you check the door handles, their doors are required to be locked. They're not required to keep them closed. You know, we're kind of walking a fine line of trying to deliver education in a school setting instead of a prison setting. Teachers have, there's reasons why the doors might be open continuously. Kids being pulled for RTI, kids being pulled for special needs, all kinds of things, why people be going in the classroom. But with the door locked, in case of an emergency or a lockdown, it's just a matter of slamming the door and they're behind the locked door. The door should be locked. They can do their instruction. That's up to the teacher and the building administrator whether we've not required any closed doors.
Interesting. The safety presentation that was done at the KSBA Institute this summer, that was in the KSBA Advocate, I thought emphasized closing and locking classroom doors as a basic safety procedure. Were you at that session, Scott?
I was at that session.
I mean, the KSBA article seemed to be a rehash of that presentation. So we don't think it's important for classroom doors to be locked?
Yes.
Classroom doors be locked.
In my humble opinion, I think safety, certainly, whether we spend money on, tax money on safety and how much we spend is an important thing, but in terms of getting in the weeds on that, that's probably best suited for a different meeting.
Okay.
But certainly, how much we,
Withdraw my,
but how much we spend on safety is absolutely a concern
To
of the
answer
tax
your
rate.
question, the SROs will eat up the 100,000 by themselves, the addition.
And Ms. Hicks, I certainly didn't want to
that's fine.
minimize the importance of it. It's very important. I just think we probably ought to
Okay.
do it in another meeting. It might even be certainly an expansive meeting just on that. So in terms of the motion that's on the floor that's been seconded, is there further discussion about that?
At last year's meeting, tax meeting, the utility rate of 3% was included, just for information. Based on the motions that were made.
Any thoughts on that,
The-
Mr. Elkins? I'd be happy to.
Okay, there were separate motions, but motor vehicles and utilities were included in the same motion. Both the recommended motor vehicle tax rate of 0.535 and the recommended utility tax rate of 3% will remain the same for 2017-18 as the 2016-2017 rates.
I very much appreciate you bringing up that information. And as far as I'm concerned, I would be happy to modify my motion to include a reference to a utility tax rate of 3%. Mr. Perrigo, would you have any problem with that being included as a
I'll
seconder
second
on that motion?
I'll second that.
Was that clear to you, Mrs. Nance? Thank you, ma'am. Is that okay if we handle that addition of specifying the utility rate of 3% through that method of just modifying the motion?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question. What I can tell you is that what I think was on your agenda was to try to determine a potential rate
Utilities on here
It
too.
is on there.
for property.
Utilities is on here too.
Is it?
Yeah, it is on there.
Well, then I better just retract what I said and you better try to determine that rate too.
Okay. Well,
And
thank
read
you
it close
again.
enough.
Thank you again, Mrs.
Thank you,
Six,
Mr.
for catching that.
Mr. Christie, what is your recommendation with this motion?
I'm all right with the motion as long as there's no problem with potential versus proposal. And if there's no problem with the motion here in the boardroom being different from what's advertised in the paper, if their attorney says there's no problem with that, I'm okay with the way this motion's written.
Let me just devote just another minute or two to that. And I've said this in discussion for informational purposes between Mr. Heisel and myself. I think I think every time this topic comes up, it falls against a background where there are any number of people who've sat in these chairs or chairs just like these under these very same circumstances and in times past in places where none of us were present. I'm sure that lessons were learned. And because we're not able to recall them today or because they're not right now popping up in front of us doesn't mean that the KSB or the KDE proposed notice and method and the offered proposed motion wouldn't work better. That maybe something happened in the past, and through the time and experience, we decided that this simpler model that's formatted by KDE, we know that works. So when we step away from that and we do something different, because I think maybe in this case we have to try to get to a tax hearing, and then I think that we do the best that we can to comply with the law, and I think that the law in this case requires us to consider a potential rate, list those 8 pieces of information in a public notice to the public in the local newspaper, and have a tax hearing. And so I think we're accomplishing that, but certainly by a different vehicle than what has been time tested.
Are you comfortable with that answer?
Well, I can go.
I'm just Personally, it sounds like a lot of legal talk for, I'm not sure.
Well,
So I don't
yeah,
know.
sure, that's exactly
kinda-
right.
Well, but, you know, when I pull up
That's
KRS
exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
160.470, the particular wording that we received from KDE, in terms of, I got to pull my glass off, see, but I don't think they use the word propose or potential. They talk about, as you said, the 8 things and what needs to be conveyed. And
Correct.
I don't think the law doesn't require the use of the word propose.
I agree. But to speak to Mr. Christie's point, the problem is unless you can find, when we're answering legal questions, we're talking about very finite results to a particular issue. And so that would mean that somewhere in the past, somebody would have had to make this motion. It would have had to been approved, would have to been challenged, it would have to go to the circuit court, the judgment had to been entered, somebody would have to appeal it, and then the Court of Appeals answer to that question is the law. Well, I submit to you, I don't think that's ever happened. So we're essentially placing ourselves in
Play on new ground.
we're putting ourselves in a position to possibly be the ones to find out.
No.
I don't think that's the case, but it could be.
But I don't really think we're venturing very far off the reservation here.
Well, the only reason I can't agree with you on that point is because I don't know what else has happened through time. I know when you forget history, you have to relearn the lessons.
I will. I think practically it's the best we can come up with, if we can get three-person or 4-person vote on it.
Well, that I agree.
I can't vote for the word, I can't vote for a motion that has, that we're proposing a,
I'm not sure I can vote for the other with the superintendent being concerned and the attorney.
well, then there we go, then we've just approved the compensating rate. If we went down that path. I mean, I was hop, skipping, and jumping that if we couldn't come up with a, anything that was a 3-vote support, then
It defaults to the
then move
center.
forward and it falls to the compensating.
I'm fine, potential proposal,
Yeah.
hope we get to, whatever. I mean, I think as long as we have the 8 things, I mean, guys, we're arguing over a wording here now, and all we need to do is inform the public that we're gonna raise taxes and let them come in and do it. That's just, to me,
Possibly, potentially going to raise taxes.
that's kind of where I think we are. And I mean, when Scott says he reads the law and it doesn't say anything in the law about it, it basically says, make sure you have the 8 things in there. Our attorney says the 8 things are in there.
Have the 8 things in there and tell the public you might be doing this, so they'll know whether they come down here or not. Is there any further discussion on the motion that's on the floor? All righty, I'll call for the vote. Why don't, let me back up a second, take a quick pause. We could either do a vote on this, or if we think that this is the most practical thing, we could simply approve this by consensus. Let me take a pass at that first. Do we have a consensus as a board that the motion, that we approve this motion? Could we get a harumph out of everybody on this? Okay.
Okay.
Can we essentially say that we've got a consensus of the board on this motion? Or do we
And the
need
minutes
to,
would
or do we have to
say
take a
by
specific
general
vote?
consent.
By general consent or general consensus, what would be the correct terminology, Mr.
Well,
Elkins?
I think that the best method going forward would be to take a vote. I can't give my second best answer.
You could, but
You didn't have to ask me, but you did.
You could.
Potentially, you think this could be,
All right.
proposed it.
You could, but it's your second best answer, though. Well, again, I did not go to law school. I walked past it several times. All right, well, let's just take a stab at it with a regular vote then. All those in favor of this motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there any opposed?
No.
Okay, so that motion passes 3-1, and Mrs. Six is the dissenting vote. All righty, now we move on to item number 3.
Just the ad.
That's the ad, and of course, where it uses, in this draft ad, it has the words date and time. And that's what we'll be addressing here in item number 3. Set the dates and times for the tax rate hearing and special meeting. Set the final tax rate for 2018, 2019. Again, without belaboring the fact, we're proposing a rate, we're setting up our potential rate, etc. We're not actually setting a rate at this point in time. We're just putting the public on notice that there's a potential rate increase of that maximum amount and the minimum amount that was stated in my motion. So what dates, Mr. Attorney, do we have to work with that complies with the advertising requirements that says the District Board of Education shall advertise a needed hearing by causing the ad to be published at least twice for 2 consecutive weeks in the newspaper with the largest circulation in the county? And I believe that'd be the Winchester Sun, wouldn't it?
Yes.
That is an awesome newspaper. So what dates are we dealing with?
Well, I think you're dealing with, you
Just having a little
it's
fun.
gonna take at least 14 days, so you have to publish the notice potentially as early as, I don't know what day what the turnaround is, then you have to publish it again 7 days later, and then you have to have your hearing within 7 to 10 days of that time, so.
Well, let me throw out a quick if. So if we already had this typed in format that could be electronically transmitted to them, and if they said, yes, we can get it in the 18th, Saturday the 18th paper, that qualifies for this week?
Yes.
Or does, it says has to be published at least twice for 2 weeks. Is that 2 ads or is that 4 ads?
It's 2 ads.
Okay. So if we could get in the paper here on the 18th,
Second.
Saturday, then in the paper next week, that would free us up to be able to have our hearing anytime from the 27th on. Am I,
Well, the second publication needs to be 7 days away from the first publication, so it
should be the 18th and the 25th.
Okay. And then beginning 7 days later, you could have a hearing potentially on the 7th day out through the 10th day.
Okay. So there's some ifs in there, and that we could actually get it in the paper on the 18th to go down that path.
We can get it into the 18th. We've got the ad here. We get it into.
When does the newspaper stop publishing one day? That's not a Saturday, is it?
It's on Monday.
Monday.
We don't
Okay.
publish Mondays anymore.
Okay.
So 2 ads have to be 7 days apart.
Correct.
And then the hearing 7 to 10 days after the last
second.
one.
Yeah, after the second advertisement.
Are you all comfortable with a Saturday?
Well, it's 7 to 10 days, so 7 days would be, y'all would use that just advertising on Saturday?
Well, I mean, to get it going this week, Saturday, I think is the only realistic day we have available left in this week. Are you all comfortable with the Saturday ad? Do you think that readership would be better on a different day of the week? I know in a conversation, in different public meetings I've been in with a publisher, that he's mentioned that the end of the week is certainly one of their higher circulations. And I don't know if that's Saturday or Sunday or both, or Saturday, Friday or Saturday, or both of those are good.
Saturday's fine.
Saturday's fine with me.
Saturday's fine with me.
Okay,
General consent.
I like that. We think there's a pretty good chance we can get it in Saturday's paper based upon your all's history.
We send it tonight, so it's added.
Maybe not, because it's usually the cutoff is like by noon, 2 days ahead, right?
I'm not sure about 2 days ahead, but it's usually noon.
I know, yeah.
You know, we could take a brief break and see if we can contact anybody from the Sun, and then.
I say we just go for it.
Well, the
the
risk we
person
have
sitting
though.
here.
Ads, but-
Well, I mean, if we don't,
risk
if
we
we
have,
don't,
though,
we're just
we're
gonna
gonna
go
be able to reach anybody
to
tonight.
Tuesday.
But
We're just moving it to Tuesday if it doesn't go Saturday, right?
But if
So that would be the next
But then
available ad.
that puts our whole meeting back a week though.
Yeah.
But it's still,
I think that's the safest date.
What,
Okay.
Tuesday?
I think Tuesday's the safest date. We know for sure we can get it published on Tuesday. I think Saturday's the
Okay.
we do the
So,
first,
21st and 28th, and then if we did those dates, then when could we have our meeting?
7 days after that's the
10th.
4th.
September 4th.
10th would be the,
Oh, there's the 28th,
The 4th or the 5th.
the 4th or the 5th?
Now, potentially the 6th or the 7th, but I'll have a schedule conflict after the 5th, so.
You said 7 to 10 days.
It can-
Correct.
And that count, that's not, okay. So yeah, then the 4th would be the earliest possible advertising on Tuesday.
For the 7 days, right? Four
That
would
would
be
be
from the
7
last.
days. That would be an ad on Tuesday, another ad on the next, on one Tuesday, and then 7 days later have a meeting on another Tuesday. That's 3 Tuesdays straight.
So we could potentially have it on the schedule on the 7th.
That's a
Lisa,
Friday.
what's-
Yeah.
Lisa, what's our deadline?
September 16th.
Okay.
That puts us in
the time frame.
Yeah, we're
The
good there.
15th is a Saturday, the 16th is a Sunday.
The 14th.
I'd have to go look at my calendar in my office. I wrote it down, the 45 days exactly.
But that puts us within it right there, 21st, 28th, 4th.
So the 4th is obviously the day after Labor Day.
Correct.
Y'all,
I can't do the 4th.
you can't do the 4th?
Nope.
Okay, what dates can you do?
The 5th, I can do. Yeah, I know, and Judy
I can't do
can't.
the 5th and 6th, but I can do the 7th.
I can't do the 7th.
We have to inform KDE by September 14th. That's the
Okay,
45
maybe the
days.
10th. Judy?
So that opens up the next week to us also then?
Can you do the 11th?
I can do the 11th.
I can do the 11th.
How's the 11th look for your schedule, Mr. Peridot?
Oh, it's fine with me, but do we have to change when we advertise there?
Right.
We'd have to
Through the
change to the
11th.
28th and the 4th then, wouldn't we?
It's the meeting has to fall by the 10th day following the second advertisement.
So we'd have to advertise it on the 21st and 28th, 28th and the 4th, and then have the meeting on the 11th, correct?
I think you're leaving yourself a pretty thin schedule if something happens and you're not able to come to, adopt a rate if you wait right out to the deadline, but.
Well, the 11th, what's our drop dead date?
14th.
14th? Well, but the week before doesn't work for our board schedule. I think we want to have as many of our board members there as possible.
Yes.
I could, I'm happy to try to consult via text right now with Dr. Kudak, but right now, the 11th seems to work for each of us, and I think, I'm willing to be wrong here, that at this point in time, all we really need to specify is the date of the meeting, and then staff could figure out when the ad needs to go in the paper.
Okay, but this is for the hearing, right?
Yes.
And then when is
Yeah.
our meeting immediately following the hearing?
Now, certainly, I'm still new with this, but I think that's typically what we've done.
Okay.
Is that typically what's happened?
That's kind of what I expected, but.
Yeah. So I think
been
we've
clarified.
done, let's see what we did what we did last year. We had a 6 PM meeting, and I believe that our follow-up was at 6:30, because we heard from no one. So what we're kicking around then is a September the 11th, 6 PM meeting.
6 PM hearing and then meeting.
I'm
For
sorry,
the
6 PM
hearing.
hearing, I apologize, 6
6:30.
PM hearing.
Right.
Does that work for your all schedule?
It's good for me.
It's good for me.
I can't do it, but, I don't get a vote anyway,
Yeah,
You're out till when?
till the 15th.
So you, well,
well, it doesn't, I'm not saying you're not needed, but you're probably not needed, so we just gotta set the rate.
I'm saying we'll miss you terribly.
Thank you.
Just
That's all I needed to hear.
have a good time. That's all.
I'm easy to get along with.
Yeah.
All righty, then I'm gonna make a motion that we set the date and time of the tax rate hearing of September the 11th at 6 PM, September the 11th, 2018 at 6 PM. And then we set then a special meeting to consider tax rates, consider setting tax rates on September the 11th at 6:30 PM here in the board offices. Does that, Mr. Elkins, does that seem
Do we have
compliant?
to have that time exact for a special meeting? Because what if we have more people who are going to speak and we're not finished at 6:30, are we bound by the special meeting law?
Well,
Does the hearing not have to be exactly an hour?
It wasn't an hour last year.
Exactly an hour, hasn't
It wasn't an hour last year.
it? Oh, it wasn't?
I don't think so.
I don't remember any provision like
Sorry,
that,
I thought it was always an hour.
but it sort of turns into a pop quiz when we start trying to decide sitting at the table. I think you just have to offer comment, and I think you are entitled, sir, as the chairperson, to preside over that, and determine what the reasonable time limitations for the people present are.
But I think Mrs. Hick's specific question is if we don't start a special meeting precisely at 6:30,
Well, we didn't start
problem with
tonight's at 6:30,
This was 6:31 tonight.
Jim started.
oh, you hurt my feeling.
Not because of you necessarily, it was just.
Well, who else is having, who's calling, huh? All right, so the answer is, if we don't start the special meeting till 6:35, 6:40, whatever, you think that,
I think you're okay.
okay. And I suppose where the huge downside would be is we started the meeting early. That would
Correct.
preclude members of the public who were expecting to be able to make public comments. We started early, we might cut them off at the pass.
Correct.
Okay.
Second.
Did you second my
I'll second.
motion, Mr. Peridone? Thank you. Is there any further discussion on these meeting dates that I've just established via motion and Mr. Peridone was kind enough to second? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 4-0. The last part of our agenda
I make a motion to adjourn.
is the adjournment. I believe we have a motion by that nice lady at the end, Ms. Ritchie. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Mr. Peridot. Any discussion?
No.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes 4-0, and we are adjourned
Are you
at
taking your break with you?
7:38 PM.
I'm taking it because